Emily Turner thought a weekend getaway with her boyfriend Tyler Grant would bring clarity to their troubled relationship. But within 48 hours, she would be dead, and Tyler would be weaving a desperate web of lies to cover up his chilling story of love, betrayal, and the horrifying lengths someone will go to hide the truth. Emily Turner had always been the kind of person people noticed when she walked into a room. At 22, she carried a brightness that made her friends gravitate toward her, a sense of warmth that never felt forced. She had a wide circle of people who adored her. Yet, when it came to a relationship, many kept quiet. Her boyfriend, Tyler Grant, was someone they didn't quite understand. To them, he seemed polite on the surface, but there was something about his quiet intensity that made some uneasy. Still, Emily often brushed off their concerns. She insisted he was complicated, not unkind. When Tyler suggested they take a trip together, Emily hesitated. Their relationship had been rocky for months, full of arguments about small things that escalated into long silences. Tyler was protective, sometimes too much, always asking who she was texting, where she was going, and when she would be back. Emily had begun to notice how his questions no longer felt like care, but control. Her friends knew she had been thinking of ending things. Yet Tyler's offer of a weekend away seemed like the perfect opportunity for her to figure out what she wanted. The cabin was 3 hours outside the city, nestled in a wooded area near a quiet lake. Tyler described it as the kind of place where they could disconnect from the world and reconnect with each other. Emily told her closest friend she wasn't sure if it would fix anything, but she hoped the time away would at least give her some clarity. She packed her bags with light optimism, filling them with casual clothes, a journal, and a few books she thought might help keep her centered. The drive up on Friday was calm at first. Emily watched the scenery shift from concrete streets to winding country roads, the trees thickening as the car moved deeper into isolation. Tyler was in high spirits, talking about how peaceful the weekend would be. Emily nodded, smiling faintly, though she felt a growing weight in her chest. She wanted to believe this trip might change things, but a small voice inside told her it might be too late. They arrived at the cabin in the early evening. The wooden structure looked cozy, with smoke rising from a small chimney and a porch that creaked under their steps. Inside, the place smelled faintly of pine, with simple furniture and a fireplace that gave it a rustic charm. Emily took a deep breath, trying to focus on the calmness of the setting. Tyler seemed eager, almost overly so, unpacking quickly and pulling her into plans for dinner. As night fell, they sat across from each other at the small wooden table, candles flickering between them. Tyler spoke about their future, about how they could make things work if Emily gave him a chance. She listened quietly, twirling the stem of her wine glass, torn between hope and hesitation. The weekend had only just begun, but beneath the soft glow of the cabin lights, there was already an undercurrent of tension neither of them could ignore. By the second evening, the quiet calm of the cabin began to feel heavier than it had the night before. Emily woke up early that Saturday morning, stepping outside onto the porch to watch the fog lift from the trees. She thought about her life back home, the conversations she had avoided, and the uncertainty that lingered every time she looked at Tyler. She knew that at some point during this trip she would need to be honest with him. The thought filled her with dread, but she couldn't ignore it any longer. Tyler seemed in good spirits at first. He made breakfast, cracked small jokes, and tried to keep the mood light. But there was an edge to his laughter, a forced quality that Emily couldn't overlook. She sensed that he, too, was waiting for the conversation that hung unspoken between them. By midday, small irritations had already begun to surface. Tyler grew frustrated. When Emily wanted to take a walk alone by the lake, he insisted on joining her, turning what should have been a peaceful stroll into something tense and stifling. Emily tried to shake it off, but her silence only made him more restless. As the day wore on, the walls of the cabin seemed to close in. The remoteness that had once felt calming now pressed down on Emily, making her feel trapped. She retreated to her journal, sitting by the window to write, but even then she could feel Tyler's eyes on her. He asked what she was writing, why she was keeping things from him, and his tone carried a bite that made her stomach twist. Emily avoided confrontation, giving vague answers, hoping to keep the peace. But she knew the moment she tried to tell him the truth, his fragile calm would crack. That night, the inevitable conversation came. Over dinner, Emily tried to explain that she wasn't sure their relationship could continue. She spoke carefully, choosing her words with gentleness, but the message was clear. She needed space, and she wasn't ready to keep pretending things were fine. For Tyler, those words weren't just a disappointment, they were a rejection he couldn't accept. His face hardened, his voice grew louder, and the table between them became a battleground of emotion. The argument escalated quickly. Tyler accused her of leading him on, of wasting his time, of never really caring about him. Emily tried to calm him, but her attempts only seemed to fuel his anger. His words became sharper, his movements more erratic, until the tension in the room became unbearable. Emily stood, ready to walk away from the fight, but Tyler couldn't let it end there. In a flash of anger, he grabbed her, his voice echoing through the cabin as frustration gave way to violence. It happened faster than either of them could process. One moment they were shouting, and the next, Emily collapsed to the wooden floor. The sound of her body hitting the ground filled the silence that followed, a silence so heavy it seemed to crush the air from the room. Tyler stood frozen, staring at what he had done, his mind racing, his breath uneven. Emily lay motionless, the life that had filled her only moments ago extinguished in an instant. The weight of his actions settled over him like a shroud. Panic began to rise, but behind it was a grim realization. There was no undoing what had just happened. In the dim light of the cabin, Tyler was no longer just a boyfriend struggling to hold on to a failing relationship. He was something far darker. And his choices from that moment forward would only drag him deeper into the darkness. Tyler's first reaction after Emily's death was shock, a paralyzing numbness that left him staring at the still form on the cabin floor. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by his shallow breaths. The reality of what he had done began to take shape, and fear surged through him. He could already imagine the questions, the accusations, the prison walls closing in. Instead of facing what had happened, his mind latched onto a single desperate thought. He had to make it look like Emily was still alive. He moved quickly, almost frantically, dragging her body across the cabin floor. The wooden boards groaned under the weight, leaving faint streaks that he tried to scrub with a damp towel. Panic made his movements clumsy, but he pressed on. He wrapped Emily in a blanket, carried her out to the car, and shoved her into the trunk. The thud of the lid closing echoed in his ears like a final judgment, but he pushed the sound away. Back inside the cabin, Tyler scanned for anything that might tie him to what happened. He wiped down the table, tossed out the shattered wine glass, and scrubbed the faint traces of blood where Emily had fallen. His hands shook as he worked, but he convinced himself that if he erased the signs, no one would ever know. He didn't realize that even the smallest trace could expose him later. Once the cabin looked clean, his focus shifted to Emily's phone. He unlocked it using her fingerprint, scrolling through her texts and social media. Dozens of friends had messaged her, asking about the trip, checking in on her plans. Tyler typed out casual replies, pretending to be Emily, assuring everyone that she was fine. He even sent a photo they had taken the first night, a smiling picture meant to sell the illusion that nothing was wrong. As night fell, Tyler decided he needed to create a stronger cover. He drove into the city, parking Emily's car near a busy shopping center. With her phone in hand, he wandered through the crowds. Making sure security cameras caught him as though Emily was still alive and moving around, he posted updates to her accounts, liking photos, even adding a short message about enjoying the weekend. He thought it was clever, a way to prove she hadn't disappeared yet, but every move he made was building a trail that would eventually betray him. Back at his apartment, he couldn't sleep. The silence was unbearable, broken only by the memory of Emily's last moments. He paced the floor, checking her phone again and again, convincing himself he was ahead of suspicion. He planned to return the car and body later, once he figured out a safe place to leave her. Tyler believed his lies could stretch reality, that digital words and photos could replace the truth. What he didn't realize was how fragile his cover was. The inconsistencies in his messages, the unnatural tone in his replies, and the lingering evidence in the cabin all waited to catch up with him. For now, though, he told himself he still had control, but in the shadows of his mind, the walls were already beginning to close in. By Sunday morning, the carefully constructed mask Tyler had built around himself was beginning to crack. Emily's friends had grown increasingly uneasy. The texts they received from her phone the night before had seemed off, the tone and choice of words not quite matching the Emily they knew so well. She had always been warm and thoughtful, but the messages read like they had been rushed, almost mechanical, filled with emojis she rarely used. Her closest friend, Claire, was the first to say aloud what others were already thinking. Something wasn't right. When Emily didn't show up for their planned brunch that morning, alarm bells went off. Her friends called repeatedly, only to hear her cheerful voicemail message again and again. Claire reached out to Emily's parents, who had also been trying to reach their daughter without success. Within hours, worry turned into dread, and the Turners contacted the police to report her missing. The case was taken seriously from the start. Emily was reliable, the kind of person who always kept in touch, and her sudden silence was deeply out of character. Investigators wasted no time tracing Emily's phone activity. They discovered that her device had last pinged near the cabin before showing movement into the city late Saturday evening. The pattern was unusual, as though someone was deliberately moving around to be seen. At the same time, they began piecing together her social media posts. While there were recent updates, something about them raised suspicion. The captions didn't align with her typical writing style. And friends confirmed that the photo used had been taken earlier, not that same day as it appeared. Meanwhile, Tyler continued his act, sending one last text from Emily's phone to Claire, claiming she had gone for a walk to clear her head and needed space. The message only deepened suspicions. Emily had confided in her friends many times before, but never in such vague, distant language. The police, already aware of the strained relationship, turned their attention toward Tyler almost immediately. Detectives visited the cabin that afternoon, where they noticed faint smears on the wooden floorboards. Despite Tyler's frantic cleaning, small traces of blood had soaked into the cracks of the wood. They also found signs of a struggle. An overturned chair, a broken wine glass, buried in the trash. It was enough to confirm that something violent had happened. Security footage from the shopping center further undermined Tyler's story. Cameras clearly showed him carrying Emily's phone, walking alone. At no point was Emily visible, and the footage time-stamped his presence exactly when her account had been updated. 2 investigators! It looked less like a couple spending the weekend together and more like one person staging an elaborate deception. As suspicion mounted, Tyler began to unravel. He grew paranoid, avoiding calls from Emily's parents and ignoring repeated knocks at his apartment door. He had convinced himself that if he held out long enough, if he kept spinning the illusion, people would eventually believe Emily had chosen to disappear. But the net was tightening around him, each piece of evidence eroding the fragile story he clung to. What Tyler failed to realize was that his lies had already drawn more attention than the truth ever would. Every forced message, every staged detail, every trace he thought he had erased was leading investigators closer to the terrible reality he was desperate to hide. By the time Sunday night fell, Tyler's web of lies had almost completely unraveled. Police had gathered enough inconsistencies to view him not just as a boyfriend with answers, but as their primary suspect. Still, Tyler clung to the belief that he could outsmart everyone. He paced around his apartment, Emily's phone in one hand, his own in the other, switching between messages as if juggling 2 identities. His heart raced with every vibration, every knock at the door. He knew the illusion was slipping but couldn't bring himself to stop. Investigators obtained a warrant to search his apartment and vehicle early Monday morning. When officers arrived, Tyler wasn't there. He had left in the middle of the night, convinced he could buy more time by disappearing. In his bag, he carried cash, a change of clothes, and a bus ticket to another state. It was a desperate attempt to escape the tightening circle, but it was already too late. Back at the parking lot, where Tyler had left the car, police made the discovery that sealed his fate. Inside the trunk, under layers of blankets and clothes, they found Emily's body. The weight of that revelation spread quickly through the investigative team, confirming what her friends and family feared most. The cover-up had failed, and the truth was more horrifying than anyone had imagined. As investigators combed through the evidence, the story became clear. The bloodstains hidden in the cabin floor! The security footage showing Tyler alone with Emily's phone. The unnatural messages to her friends' every detail painted a picture of a man who hadn't. T just killed his girlfriend in a fit of rage, but had spent the next 48 hours trying to erase her existence. Instead of remorse, there had been calculation. Instead of grief, deception. Police tracked Tyler down at a bus terminal less than an hour before his scheduled departure. He was arrested without incident, though his face betrayed a mixture of defeat and disbelief, as if he still couldn't understand how everything had crumbled so quickly. The same calm/controlled demeanor that once convinced Emily to trust him had finally betrayed him. Investigators could see through the mask now. The trial that followed was swift. The jury listened as prosecutors laid out the evidence in painstaking detail, showing how Tyler had gone to extraordinary lengths to stage Emilia's life online, while she was already gone. They emphasized the cruelty of using her phone, her photos, her voice and text to comfort her friends with lies while her body lay hidden. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of his defense. For Emily's family, the hardest part wasn't only losing Hurrit, was realizing how calculated Tyler's actions had been in the hours after her death. They had once welcomed him into their home, trusted him with their daughter, and now had to face the truth of what he had done. The horrifying 48 Tower cover-up became the story that defined the case. A chilling reminder of how far desperation and control could drive a person. When the verdict was read, there was no shock in the courtroom. Tyler was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison. The final chapter of Emily's life had ended in violence, but her story lived on as a warning. Told and retold by those determined never to let her memory be erased the way Tyler had once tried to do.